Hi, I'm Scott Heileson, and I collect vintage watches issued to the French Navy, or Marine Nationale. Today we're going to talk about a Tudor Submariner issued to the French Navy in 1983. This is a Tudor Submariner, reference 94010. Its serial number is 63119. The case is 38 millimeters, and the lugs are 20 millimeters, which is consistent with all the Tudor Submariners we'll be talking about in this series. It was hard to find, so I reached out to other people that had this watch on Instagram and asked if maybe they would sell it to me. I didn't get any bites, but one owner connected me to the person that they had sold their watch to, and I reached out to that person and they kindly connected me to the person that they had sold the watch to. So I got about 3 levels deep before the trail went cold. Eventually, a dealer that I've worked with over the years, Basha of ClassicWatch.com, was able to source this example for me. This was the last Tudor MN to enter my collection. This watch is a black dial with a daggers and dots configuration. It also has a really unique hour hand, which collectors call the lollipop hour hand, because it's a solid disc of luminous material on the hour hand instead of the more traditional Mercedes type hour hand that you'll see on other Tudor Submariners. There doesn't seem to be much rhyme or reason. There's not a specific serial range that has the solid lollipop hour hand. As we'll see later in this series, I have an example that's just 2 serial numbers apart from this example that has a Mercedes style hour hand, but it's a great look. The case on this example is strong, but the chamfers have definitely been worn away over time or perhaps polishing. Being a 94010 model, it also has the triplock crown. And this was a watch that was issued in 1983, which represents the last of the Tudor Submariners issued to the French Navy. The bezel is black and you can see the fading, and it's bidirectional, which all these Tudor Submariners have. It's not a ratcheting bezel as you might expect on some of the later Tudor Submariners. Turning the watch over, we can see the engraving on the back, MN83. MN stands for Marine Nationale, or French Navy, and 83 indicates that this watch was issued in 1983. We can see on the case back here that there's evidence of this watch having been worn on a bracelet. While these were issued without a bracelet, it's okay that this watch has these marks because probably in civilian use, somebody put it on a bracelet, and that's okay. It's meant to be worn. But it is a nice little touch if you happen to find a Marine Nationale example without the without markings on the back of the lugs, indicating that it was probably never mounted on a bracelet. But what's great, because this watch already has these marks, that means I can put it on a bracelet and not worry about it too much, and it's a fun way to wear the watch. So on the inside of this watch, there are no watchmaker inscriptions of the type that we reviewed in our previous episode, so it's plain on the inside. But this watch came with a really interesting piece of provenance called the decommission paper. This is a paper that accompanied this watch. You can actually see that there's a piece of wire here that would have attached the watch to the paper when this was sold at a government auction. This paper may have accompanied the watch throughout its service in the French Navy, and it tells us a lot of useful information about how this watch was used and which unit. These decommission papers are exceptionally rare, so if you happen to get an example that has one, it's really special. The reason collectors call these decommission papers is because these papers were typically accompanying the watch at a government auction. When these were sold at government auction, these were effectively military equipment that was decommissioned, meaning that it was no longer property of the state and therefore passed into private hands or civilian hands and therefore decommissioned. And that's what this Reforme means on the stamp that's on this paperwork. This paper tells us some interesting things about this watch's history. For example, right up at the top, first we know that the serial number 63119 matches the watch, so that's good. It tells us it's a 94010 Tudor. It's a diving watch. It tells us that this watch was associated with the Commando Joubert, which is kind of like a Navy SEAL unit of the French Navy, and they would do maritime invention, direct action, land or sea assaults, that sort of stuff, which is really cool, by the way. This watch has some cool stamps on it from various departments of the French Navy, marking it as an official copy. It also tells us down here that it was issued to the French Navy in 1983 and specifically the first quarter of 1983. This is a little interesting piece of detail that you typically wouldn't get from just a watch because again, this just told us it was issued in 1983, but we didn't know much more. But with this paper, we know that it was issued in the first quarter of 1983, and even better, it was issued to a commando unit, the Commando Javert. Last, at the bottom of this paper, we see that there's a stamp from September 1999, which is believed to be the time that this was sold at government auction. While I've heard over the years that there were blank versions of these cards sold at various watch trade shows, I haven't actually seen one yet, but you should still be careful of fakes. Definitely compare the font on these to other known examples of decommission papers and really make sure that everything else checks out because again, it's just a piece of paper and it can be easily faked. But if you are careful and do your research, you should be able to avoid it. Having this paper makes this watch that much more exciting to put on the wrist because you know not only is it issued to the French Navy, but it was issued to a commando unit, which evokes a lot of fun memories and cosplay type opportunities. Next week, we're going to talk about a Tudor Submariner issued to the French Navy that was a bit mysterious at first because it has no engravings on back. But thankfully, we were able to do some research and reveal some of its story.